Hello, Claude.
So now it's working.
Yep.
Yeah, we had not so good news from America, huh? Andrew's
No.
tank has some issues, I heard.
Yeah, valve stuck and drained 10,000 gallons, and the alarms that were supposed to go off didn't send any alerts. And he was cleaning his makeup water, so he usually has 10,000 gallons, and it took him 6 hours to make up 10,000 more gallons.
Oh man, this is nothing how you can wish somebody. This is really bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. So he's totally stressed about it. He's just, I mean, I've lost tanks, you've lost tanks, but to lose a tank that's basically been your life's work for the past 6 years is devastating.
Yeah, well, what you want, the problem is what you want to do. So this is, that's also something which you can call, which is a difference between building up a system based on professional, and
Yep.
on the other side, if you try to do big, large reef tanks with some mixture of private and professional stuff. So
Yeah.
we were there 2 years ago and had the possibilities to see how it's built up, and we would not doing that on that way. So when I work with a lot of large aquariums in the world, also from the Chinese, which are mostly the biggest
Right.
one, and there is a total different structure to avoid such situations in large tanks. So very often the techniques is on the upper floor, so that the reef tank at the end is the filter
Right.
to prevent. Then there is overflow. So even if the upper deck is something wrong and all the water will come back, it automatically has an overflow and have a reservoir which is in the lower deck. So it's never possible that these tanks are losing water or something like that.
Right.
If it's not cracking, so no, that can happen, as you see in Berlin. But
Right.
mostly these crackings or these mistakes coming from detailed planning. So valves you need to avoid to use too much valves and that stuff. So it's very
Right.
often that happens.
Yeah, and you need to have redundancy within a system so that if something fails, there's something that backs it up.
Yeah, this is the problem. If you need to calculate these failing, because it is every time something failed. So this is really when
Yeah,
we build.
as we all know, Claude, there's always something. Literally, there's always something.
Yeah, unfortunately, definitely it is.
Yep.
That's definitely right. Yeah, you're right. To choose that. I just check if I get. I just will see if I can get. Give me a second, please. To see the chat, so which is easier to see. So what are we talking today? It was a little bit, because we are quite connected with the States, and I see that in the last weeks and months, many discussions about ICPs coming, and
Right.
we also talk very often about it. And it's I wanted that we do some more live streams and answering some specific questions coming out to do this. But how's your tank doing now?
It's as good as it's been in the last probably 5 years.
Yeah, you
I'm
like
not
it?
fooling around. I'm not changing anything. Everything is like this. So the corals have started to take off. The ammonia dosing's good. The phosphate to nitrate ratio is good. After I do my ICP test, I tweak the trace elements. And we'll talk about those as well, because the one question I get and that I have is, and we'll do this online, but I'm not going to do it now. I'll do it once we're talking.
We can, cause I thought it was a really nice question. Is the situation that if you thought you want to do something, and so that these test sheets coming out now seems that they will be becoming as I have to dose everything, or I don't understand why it's zero, and
Right.
why and how I can use it or not can use it, and then some other people running around and telling, oh, it's only MS, it's the only one company can do that, and all the others are shit, and it's only MS can do that, and all that long. And I think this is a lot of
Misinformation.
yeah, that's the completely misinformation, because if only MS makes possible to run a reef tank, so what we did the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So we didn't have these numbers, and there were also some very nice tanks going. So I think we need to go a little bit deeper into this discussions, because it becomes really annoying sometimes, because people now, or some specific, starting to mix the different way of testing together, and to saying that the one or the other is not so good in testing or whatever. But the main thing about the interpretation, about the real using of it, it's still a little bit unknown. So, and your last questions you had to me, and your surprising was one of these points where I said, so maybe we do a nice talk about it.
Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely it needs to be discussed and explained, because even though ICP testing has been out for 10 years, we had successful tanks before ICP testing. So, uh, you know, the people that have gotten in the last 5 years were basically, it's the same people that got in with smartphones. I wasn't raised on a smartphone. I wasn't raised on a computer. I've had to learn, but I could talk on a phone before smartphones and everything came out. It's the same way with a tank. I mean, before ICP testing, there was a lot of successful tanks. You know, what accounted for that? Well, we basically kept things as simple as possible.
Yeah. So you remember your questions where we talk about the dosing of trace elements?
I remember most of them, but I don't remember all of them. Because the first question I have in terms of dosing trace elements that I get asked all the time, which ones are important for different colors? Like, which ones are critical for reds? Like in my tank, the colors are really great, except the reds are still kind of muted. I'm not getting the brilliant reds that I see in other tanks. And my trace elements seem to be good, but I'm missing something.
I think this is the first problem what we need to clear out. There is no specific element who makes red. I will give you an example. So let me say a calcium level is very low. And now you concentrate on cobalt, or you concentrate on a vanadium sample. These elements cannot work because you missed calcium, or you missed iodine, or you missed fluoride. It is definitely not to say that this color is good for red, and this element is good for blue. What you can say is, it's one sample. It's in some corals difficult to get a blue fluorescent if you have a low bromine level. For some, it's a zinc or a strontium level. So the tips of an acropora can be bluer and can be more thriving if the strontium level is on point. But it means not that they don't do that with the bromine level. It really depends on the core. So this is probably the wrong view. If your red is still a bit muted, we have two possibilities. The first is the spectra. The second is how is the amount of organics you have? That means not the bad ones. I mean, how is the feeding? How is the other stuff? And then how is the relation? And what is mostly is there's an over fertilization going on in the tank. So very often, if you have high phosphate or super low phosphate, all that and all the different combinations can be the reason for a lower red one. So
Okay.
then it really depends. How old are the corals. So let me say you had some older corals in your tank.
Right.
And they had some time where they don't grow. So meanwhile, in the skeleton, there's growing up a lot of boring algae, the skeleton becoming dark. You had high vanadium levels, so you had a dark you have a lot of succintails in the system, and now the red cannot be shined through. So you need to reduce the succintails because you should have the red. This is very often happen in the at the red Monte cap example. Yeah. So
Yeah.
why the red Monte cap is a sign for potassium. So you see, there is no specific element to say we go on that and then we had it.
Right. It's more individual and relationships and ratios between things rather than one element. Like you're short on boron and that's causing your reds not to go. It's more your ratio of X and Y are not in line, and these other major elements are too low or too high.
Yeah. So what is one key of the red and stuff is, interestingly, it's definitely iron. So, but as the same on plants, you can have the stupid situation that you have too much or too low at the same time.
Right.
You can have the situation that you have a lot of iron in the tank, but it's blocked from phosphate. Or you have a lot of iron in the test, but it's as anti-caking.
Okay.
It's not usable. And the real iron, it's not enough there. Usually, it's not the key. Usually, you always have a little bit iron releasing from the biofilm into the tank, and we need very, very little iron. So the most tanks are completely over fertilized. Sorry.
Bless.
And so to get the red coloration, you have different situations. So you have red corals, you have corals which has only red color, and you have red fluorescent. So that means usually we say that's protein. This is the red fluorescent proteins, RFPs, and they absorb the different type of lights, and they take blue light in and they take red light out. So, and due to these change, so they have higher energy blue light comes in and they change into lower energy light, and the difference is the energy what they put in. And due to that, depending on the stuff, is so you can say the iron, the manganese, and the zinc. So is one of them, but they doesn't work if you have no phosphate or nitrogen. So that's why
Right.
I want to avoid to tell people, those iron, because this iron can make now the yellow corals completely green,
Right.
or can darken them up and can increase the growth of boring algae, where we have a lot when they're coming from the Balinese farms. So that means very different. So the first is you need a genetical code that the coral can have red. Then it's a question if you have the red, it is fluorescent protein or is a placative color. So and if it use it as a protection or as a use of blue light, there are two different things going on. So if you have a triphylia, they have fluorescent and placative reds. They mean if you put them under too strong lights, they burn the red away. It doesn't matter how many elements you have in, but mostly you need the protection elements, which are the halogens like iodine, fluorine, and bromine, and the molybdenum in together that they can protect their coloration. But mostly people let them die because they have too much light on it, too aggressive light on it. So they need a very low power and a low temperature, and then they're good. So that's why in the ICP, I told you there are some elements which you have to dose. So they are marked as important value, or
Right.
the most people, they overdose. So, because they dose everything immediately after they get the result. And
Right.
this overdosing is exactly the same like an overfertilization. So you had an overfertilized tank. We have to bring it down. And now, step by step, when it's stabilized, then you can look on the situation you have, and then you start to change it. So first you change the spectra of the light, then we will have a look if it's really necessary to dose some elements or not. And as I remember the main trace elements you have were quite okay. So, and you reported me then you start dosing the cobalt, the chromium, and all that,
Iron,
which are
vanadium,
showed at
rubidium.
zero.
Yeah. But that leads to another question that you just alluded to. After you get your ICP test results back, how long should you take to start dosing? Should you do the gradual dosing over a week, 2 weeks, the entire month? How long should you take to bring the trace elements to where you want them, rather than dosing everything like we typically do? I got the results. These 5 levels are low. I'm dumping them all in. That's the bad way to do it. You should take some time and do smaller amounts. How long do you suggest?
I'm a bit sorry for that, but it really depends. So, about which trace. So let us talk about the trace element first. So
Okay.
if you go to the test, you see that we have this type of which we call dynamic elements. So so usually we said everything which is under 1 microgram, we call it as trace element.
Right.
Everything which goes deeper than 0.1, we call them, or lower that, we call them as ultra trace elements. So the ultra trace elements are necessary for a lot of enzymatic and biological processes going around in the cores, around the cores for the bacteria. So some of them has a function of several hundred different biological functions. So a lot of things which we don't know yet exactly how they work. But of that, what we know to work is that we have these, what we call in these ICP, dynamic elements, and they have the dosing number of 1. Means they has to be in the water and they need to be dosed, because in the reef tank we need a total different way of dosing as we have in the in natural reefs, where the core is getting the trace elements about the food, not a lot about the water. So, and this is the zinc, it's vanadium, it's copper, it's nickel, and molybdenum. So now we discuss about, if you go on the level, you have the salt, you have the alkali metals, so the calcium, the potassium. Then we go down to the nutrients, and then we go down to the halogens like fluoride, bromide, and boron, and that stuff. So, and then we come to these, what we call trace elements. So iodine is a trace element, by the way, but we choose that more to the halogens, even due to the low amount. So without that, you have the right salinity, the right alkalinity, pH, and the halogens, you cannot control the trace elements. This is what I see all day long. So I see that they're doing high expensive MS tests and that stuff, and then they play around on the trace elements, but the major elements, they are not in line. And so the trace elements cannot work, cannot be used, and will be transported to the surface and building up depots in the tank. So they are not senseless, but they cannot be used as they should. Because mostly, not on all tanks, but mostly the major elements, they're not in proper line. So the salinity is not correct, the calcium is not correct, whatever. We have it very often. So the trace elements becoming, due to the discussions in many groups and forums, and mainly also done by supplier of trace element solutions, becoming an emotional thing. So, and the reason is that if you have dangerous elements, they calling as emotional. Oh, I have lead, I have arsenic, I have copper. Copper kills everything. So like that, it is not a real discussions about what is need and what not. Cause the first, when I want to know how much I have to dose, I need to ask you how much you feed and what you fed to your tank. Did you use core food or not? Did you have a lot of fish or not? And because I see so often that people getting their ICP back, iron is on 0, a sample, and then they dose iron on it. So very little iron, 1 microgram, 2 micrograms. And they're happy that they can dose. Then 2 minutes later, they feed about 100 grams of brine shrimp, and this brine shrimp containing 1 milligram of iron. So the at the end the 1,000 times more as they actually dose by the drops. And no one, and there are many products out, which you dose them, they're immediately gone because they're not fixed, they're not established in a proper organic solutions, and they will be immediately going into precipitations, and they're not usable then anymore. So it is still possible that you have a limitation of iron even if you dose it, because it depends how you dose it. But if you feed fish and you have fish in and you feed them proper with frozen food and some granule food, you always have too much iron for that what we need. You cannot detect it all day long, that's right, but this works differently. So the food coming in, the fish are eating it, the fish are shitting at the end, and the bacteria take it to the surface of the coral, producing the mucus, and then they give in a little bit of these iron into the mucus, and the coral take the mucus in, and they have enough iron. So it's not necessarily that it goes over the water. It's sometimes the corals cannot take it out of the water because it needs to transform into an organic compound. And that's the same with a lot of elements like manganese, like iron, whatever. These salts with the anti-caking, they have a huge benefit for corals like the anti-caking, like the other stuff, because you have there the situation that a little bit of this iron will be transferred from bacteria from the surfaces. And this surface will be adjusted around with your corals around. So if you have a proper current and that stuff, and you take samples from this point from the surface, you have enough iron there, more than enough. The iOS, if you have the ICP, they cannot do a detection at these super low levels. And
Right.
even if you take an MS, the MS is not more accurate or more precise as an OAS. It only can detect a little bit lower. But as every machine, it has advantages and disadvantages. So, and now you take this water out from the middle of your aquarium, and then it's going, it's shipping, and that stuff. So some of this time you lose a little bit, and then you have the MS test, and MS said you have 0.01 microgram of iron. It does not say under which circumstances and in which form the iron is in the water. So is it usable or not? This you only can see if you go now and you see, oh, my rats is not so doing good. And then you can check and use a normal OAS to say, okay, it's definitely not too much, because this is for OAS really easy to find. And for iron, the OAS is a little bit better in the whole structure as the MS. Only the difference is that you can detect it on lower levels. But the lower levels don't mean that this is biological available. The same with copper, the same with other things. So, and that's why it does not change anything. The interpretation of a test is the key. So, I will give you another example: the cobalt. So you have now your fish, and you give your fish vitamin drops or something like that, so to make them good. So, and in these vitamins is always, or in coral food and other things, you always have vitamin B12. And vitamin B12, the heart of the vitamins, of the vitamin, is copper. There's a small copper, a cobalt molecule into this vitamin. It's cobalt, I'm saying it wrong. So, and with that alone, you have more than enough cobalt in your system as you ever will need for the corals and for the others. Why? Because the bacteria on the surface on the corals, they can produce themselves vitamin B12. And they need it in super low amount. So low that even the MS has trouble to detect it. So if you have a detection with MS, you always have too much. It's not bad, but it's not necessary to dose more and more and more. Because if you dose more and more, it will react with the water, it will go to the surface, and in the surface, it will feed your, later then, when it's too much, it will feed your cyanobacteria, dinoflagellates, and anything else. So that's why it's really important to dose, to see the whole import of trace elements, the sink of trace elements, so where they go. So if I take them out, about carbon, adsorbers, or skimmer, or how much I give in, cory food, fish food, and the trace elements, which are those. And this is the major key. So that's why I told you why you dose that. So I was a little bit surprised that you dosed every little step of the ICP, while I told you please dose only first the 4 important elements and let the others done. It's not necessary to dose.
No, I agree. Now, at the beginning of this talk, you asked how my tank's doing, and compared to where it was, say, a year ago, it's light years ahead. And I think one of those reasons is you and I discussed, and Salem brought up the disadvantage of having high DOC levels in the tank.
Yeah.
And your ICP test showed me that my levels were very high. And with the use of CAC, and now I'm also using Carbal, your carbon, to bring the DOC levels down, that has seemingly, to my point of view, made the most impact of everything that I've done, because I haven't really changed that much other than not fooling around with the tank. But I didn't change things that dramatically other than bringing the DOC levels from very high into the area where we want. Now, how important do you think managing and controlling the DOC levels are compared with everything else?
The DOC level is a little bit critical to see. It is exactly the same what happens now all day long. So there is a test. Oh, it's DOC. Then you have a person working for a company, and then say, yeah, that's important. So we are the only one testing. The point is, this is exactly the same. So always the same question is, if you have organic compounds in the water, and you want to take that DOC, you can have a very high test if you have before those some amino acids or some sugars or VSV, vodka, ethanol, whatever. So then you take the sample and you test it, you will have a high DOC. This is a little bit, if you eat a sugar and you take immediately 10 minutes later, you test your blood sugar, it will be high, definitely. So, and DOC means only dissolved organic carbon. So we have to filter the sample. If you want to have a DOC test, you need to filter the sample. So you have DOC at the beginning, then you filter it, then you have DOC, and then the machine tells you that. What I test is NPOC. NPOC is the non-purgeable organic carbon. This is a lower as a DOC, but it shows you one thing. It shows you the same like the blood sugar we have is a long time sugar. So what I search are the long molecules. These molecules who will take all the trace elements and the stuff out. So this is the point why the elements are binded in. So if you have high phosphates or polyphosphates, the iron will be connected to this phosphate. They go into an organic complex. Mostly they fall out, laying on the surface, cannot be used anymore. If you have a carbon, it immediately goes into organic compounds. If you have a good carbon, it takes out. So the carbon takes the organic out, which is okay. You want to have it, but in this case, it takes also the zinc out. And then people claiming, this carbon is bad because it takes the zinc out. Yes, it's right, but always only in conclusion with these organic compounds when it's binded. So the DOC level, it's definitely something, but you have to connect it with the TNB. And then you need to see how much polyphosphates you have. So how much organic compounds are in the system and how much of them are in which state. So if you have a very high ozonization, a very high UV, you destroy the organic compounds to very little parts. The skimmer cannot move it out. The bacteria can destroy that. In this destroyment or in this decomposition, they're producing acids. This happens on the surface. So they're producing acetate and they're producing acid. And this acid will release then phosphates and nutrients back to the water. If you have too long molecules, so when your water becoming greenish, yellowish, you have these tannins and these color bodies in the water, you can see that under blue light, the water looks like it has its own glow. So it fluorescence. So, and you can really see that if you look on many shops today, and they have only the blue light on it and the UV on it, you see that the water is glowing orange or a little bit greenish. And this glowing shows you that this water is full with long chain molecules. So these are tannins, these are terpenes, and different type of long molecules. And on these long molecules, a lot of trace elements be binded and cannot be used anymore. You can say it on the easy way, the corals cannot smell it. So, and now the key is to reduce that one, that you have this clear water, but not destroy them too much, because if you destroy them too much, your skimmer doesn't work anymore. So you get a really bad skimming effect. So for that, you need some carbon. And that's a little bit the same what we have, our bodies, it's exactly the same. So if you take fiber to you, specific sugars, biopolymers, then your bacteria has a lot to do. The diversity of the bacteria keeps stable, because for long chain molecules, you need a lot of different type of bacteria. If you put a short sugar like our fructose and glucose and our alcohol, ethanol, and we get too much of it, it makes us ill, because it reduces the diversity of bacteria. This is nothing new. This is what we know from humans. This we know from many biofilms in filtration. So you can have in freshwater and seawater, it doesn't matter. And that is the key why you need to reduce. Your levels was way too high. But you remember that we also checked the phosphate organics. So the difference between the orthophosphate and the phosphate, the phosphorus. So, and your level was high. And I told you that this level has to be 1 to 1 as possible, because it shows the amount of polyphosphates. And these polyphosphates, they can be organic, but it's not necessarily. They can also be inorganic, but they also always bind or are parts of these organic compounds. So, and that's why we use more also the phosphate, we use the SAK, and we use also the NPOC. And because I don't want to have an influence of at the moment dosing amino acids or at the moment dosing bacteria or whatever solutions, there's some DSV or some other things, they always containing organic compounds. Even frozen food contains a lot, because frozen food is frozen animals, so like mice, and when you open them, all what is in the body will be releasing into the water, which is full of a DOC. But in this case, it's good for the corals, because it's exactly that what they like to have. And the compound to make the water yellow, this is something what they don't like.
Well, for testing, one of the things I still use is the white bucket method, where you put 6 gallons of clean water in and 6 gallons of water from your tank and compare the differences. And I took pictures of them when it was high, intermediate, and where I want it to be. And you can just look at the pictures and look at how yellow the water is and have a pretty good idea, and know when you have to add carbon or increase the carbon or decrease the amount of nutrients you're adding to the tank. So that's a simple method that I do every week when I do a water change.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely the one of these easy tricks. That's why we invented these heat test. So that's which you can do with your own phosphate test. You can find on the website. It's only to get a factor, and this factor shows you a little bit how much is going on in the tank. If we go too much on numbers and chasing the numbers, but don't see the numbers in relation, then it happens that what we have all day long, that we have a discussion about very rare metals or about emotional metals. So in this case, Salim is right if you say this is an important thing, but first, it's nothing new. And second, on the other side, you must really say it depends. It's not that easy to say it has to be very low, because nowadays, we have a situation which we don't have the last 10 years. We had now skimmers which has a higher speed and more efficiency as they had 10 years ago. So they put now way more air in. Then we use ozone. Then we use UVCs. They're becoming way stronger. And we're using more of specific filtration like socks or like these
Mechanical filters or filter pads, the
fleece
rotating
filters.
fleece filters, yeah.
So exactly. So what happens with the fleece filters? Very often the fleece filters, so they're not made from a paper, they're made from like the socks. So
Right.
while you put the socks the first time and then you clean the socks, you wash out all the production materials, which is necessary to produce the socks. So that means if you have a new sock, you put it in, your skimmer will be a little bit lower because these materials in these fleece filters, they're reducing the water stability. So, and then the skimmer cannot work proper. If you use, but there are others on the market which are made of PP or PE, so polyethylene or polypropylene, and they have a little dots on it, and they have no influence on the water. And this is what is important. So now we see more and more too high skimming, while too low organic compound are in the water. So the skimmer becoming like a green tea. They have such not well. If you try to smell it, it smells not good. And this is not a real proper standing foam with a dark chocolate-like material which you can put out of the skimmer. Now we have moist tea and that stuff. And this is one of the first signs that you have that the skimmer cannot concentrate skim-able products anymore. So it is in real, in this case now, if you would ask me that 5 years before, I would say this is not possible to overskim a tank. Because with our skimmer, what we use before with the needle wheels and not so much air and a little bit water going through the skimmer has time to concentrate all the products and then push it out. And now we push so much water due to the sums and so less coming into the skimmer that the skimmer never is able to do a concentration with the products he wants to skim out. So they stay in the water, they will be decomposed on the fleece filters, and then the nutrients are leaching in the tank. And so we have way more high nutrients tanks today as we have 10 years ago, where we don't use that shit. So we use a little bit of a fleece maybe or a sock, and then we clean that all 2 weeks and that is done. So, and now I see exactly from all the data from the ICP, and we're doing really a lot of tests daily. So we are really absolutely about 500 tests a day with all our machines, and we definitely see that the discussion of certain trace elements is totally wrong and unnecessary, but the relations on nutrients and the proper maintenance of skimming and how to install them, this is something which is not discussed. And same as if you have some of these emotional elements, they have way too much focus on that and not on the really important things, like you see on your own. So because you also play around all day long, I know you like it.
No, I've quit playing around. I quit playing around for the last year, Claude. I've changed my ways and have had much more success. But
Yeah.
what you're saying leads me to another question that a lot of hobbyists have. Compared with 10 years ago, we now have ICP testing. We have a much better idea of what's going on in the tank. But why are we having so much higher incidence of dinoflagellates, and particularly dinoflagellates that are much more difficult to remove than they used to be?
This is the same situation why so many people have cyanobacteria or so many people have problems with the DOC level. The dinoflagellate situation is quite easy to handle, and it's also clear why we have it. So what happens there is we have a situation that, now let me explain different. Dinoflagellates is a question of light, usually. There can be, we had that sometimes if people do renovation in their house and they're using toxic colors for the walls, and this can have an effect. But let that things out, it's really rare. The most thing is it's a light situation. So now we run on power level, we run on LED lights, we want to have it. And what we don't see is that before, when we run tubes, we have a spread light. So we have not points. Now we have all these LED trying to get a high power, and they get into high power if they use reflectors and they beam the light directly down. So the corals need now a protection agent that they can be protected against a lot of light, which they have when the sun is shining in the reefs. It's really bright well. So what they use, They need fatty acids for that. They need carotenoids, like we also need. Then they use the fluoride and zinc and molybdenum. Molybdenum is one of the major keys. And every time when I see, and there are 10,000s of tanks, when I see that there's a dinoflagellate in 95%, you see that iodine and molybdenum, or sometimes also in relation with the halogens, is lowered. So fluoride is very low, and that is very low. And in the US, the fluoride is always very low because if you dose calc water, if you dose products who makes a lot of precipitation, which is the usual way to dose, then you have a sink of these elements, which is really higher than that what we have in Europe usually. So, and you can see the difference between the countries. How is the fluoride level, the halogen levels? They're completely differently. So if I see in the UK have easy 10 times more dinoflagellates as we have in Germany. So why this happens? It's quite simple. So we use here a different way of dosing, which contains automatically more of these halogens. So due to Belling light and the Belling system and that stuff, so we have there higher levels as what the UK guys usually using, and then they put the light on it, and that causes the problem. So 90% of the way it's a light problem, reducing the light, getting the levels right on the surface, and on some very aggressive forms, then sometimes it's necessary to take some chemicals in or to do some other stuff. But what I read all day long, what they're doing with the silicate and whatever, I don't understand. I explained that since 5 years, but it seems it's the people have fun of it to be sad for months. With you can stop that within of 1 or 2 weeks. It's easy. It's really no more problem. But you need to do a diagnose on which part exactly now the problem is. Then you need to get back your cords, and you need to adjust your lights, going away of these high UV and high stuff. In 99% of all the tanks, you don't need that.
So it's a function of both light and certain low nutrients more than anything.
It is a light, and especially a relation of missing elements. Mostly it's missing halogen, so you find a very low iodine, you find a very low molybdenum, and you find low zinc or even also fluoride. So it's nearby always the case. There's some others which is not. Yes, so you see the ICP looks great, but they have these dinoflagellates. Then you need to search for other reasons. There are 2, 3, 4 other reasons, but this is only 5%. The other 95, it's the light. It's too much light and too less a view on what is in the tank. Mostly we have very high dosing of cobalt and other things there, so they don't check on the major keys. So that on the ICP, you see that we have this number on it. So 1 and 2 you need to dose, and 3 and 4 you can dose. You don't need to do that. But it's not yet coming to the right point that people understand it.
Well, one thing we talked about earlier that I'd get your opinion on as well is there's literally no literature that I can find where the corals take up the trace elements directly. It's more the bacteria take it up, and then the corals consume the bacteria. Is that a good reason why you should be feeding bacteria to the tank regularly? Or should the bacteria, once it's established, be enough to feed the corals the trace elements that they want, and you shouldn't need to feed the corals bacteria every week?
No. So the dosing of bacteria, what we're doing, has nothing to do with the bacteria which is sitting on the corals. And the bacteria what we're dosing in the reef tanks, these are they are beneficial. I talk now about the normal standard bacteria. I don't talk about these PNSB. They're a little bit different. So the normal standard bacteria, they are fast growers. They are big, and they're preparing the surrounding for the bacteria we want. So these archaeas, what we usually have in reef tanks there. Corals can take trace elements and organic compounds directly due to the surface. They have specific, like amino acids they can take. They have specific protein channels where they can take it, but they only can take small amounts. And for that, it's important that they can do that all day long. So that's the one thing. The second thing is the bacteria on the surface. They build up the trace elements into the microfilm, into the microbiome, into the biofilm, and corals can take it. Then they can take it over food. Like I say, if you feed your fish brine shrimp, you have 1,000 times more iron in these food. The fish eat it and they release it. So, but in this case, it comes out of the fish organically bound, precipitate, bind on these particles. The particles go onto the surface. And for the bacteria, there's way than enough iron there. If you dose now the iron in the water, it immediately reacts to iron 3, and iron 3 will be precipitate, go down, will be removed by the skimmer, or will be going into the together with the precipitations about the cod water, about the high pH stuff, and it will fall down. So that you lost it in the water immediately. Means that in the test you don't see it, but on the other side, it's still in the tank. So that's why we use, if you remember many, many, many years ago, it's 95, 2000 coming, the filtration over CO lights, very popular, to creating these uh, high SPS levels starting in Germany around that. So why we use that? So we use that CO light filtration to remove trace elements out of the water to becoming very, very low levels, and then adding the trace elements together with coral food into the tank to support the corals. So what we wanted, we don't use that to take the ammonia out. You can see that the ammonia is very beneficial for the bacteria, for the others. What we want to do is to take all the iron and all the other stuff out of the tanks to becoming the corals not that dark. And as you see, the difference between if you go to the US and you visit the farms, you see that they have high vanadium, high iron, high stuff into the tanks, and the corals are dark. So they're glowing, they have the fluorescent, but they are dark. So if you go to the zeolite methods, then you see that we have very bright corals with pastel colors, so pink and reds and that one. And this is the typical thing what you find out if you go out in the sea where you have very low nutrients, low alkalinity, and no water changes. So these are the high-end SPS. And what the standard customer is doing is all the corals who are living more inside the reefs near the coast. And this coral can handle the different levels, but they have high nutrients, a lot of food. And so you need, if you do primary care, if you do a care system for your tank, you need to calculate how much food the corals take, because with that food, it takes a lot of concentrated organic and trace elements into the body, way more as we can do over the water. So this is the trick between these two things. So going over feeding, checking how the corals look like. So there are many different possibilities. You can see that, like your, let me say, your red Monty cap needs a potassium, needs a phosphorus, needs a zinc high. So if all that is low, they have a nice red, but not the thriving red. So if you wanted to have a thrive and fluorescent, then you have a look on the halogens like bromine and fluoride, and at the end you check on zinc, and the molybdenum needs to be on 12, and then they're very nice red. So, and if still not, then you play around with a little bit of iron or manganese. But this is the last step, not the first step.
Well, you mentioned corals require feeding, and there's two schools. There's one school that corals will thrive just on light and fish waste, and then there's another school, which I believe in, is that corals do best when you feed them. I'm actually feeding them the milkshake recipe you came up with, and I seem to be having good success with it, along with ammonia, which I'm also dosing in the morning, along with the bolus system. All of that combined, I'm getting faster and more robust growth than I got before. How do you determine whether you should be feeding the tank, feeding your corals, or not feeding your corals?
I'm a little bit curious about that question, which comes very often. I think you read it also very often in the forums.
Yep.
Maybe let me say it on that words. Our Lord, when he has the idea to creating all these wonders, this amount of cores and how they go, he gives them a very effective way to pray. So they have the sting cells, they have specific bacteria, they have a stomach. So for me, it's really hard to understand why I have animals which was built for catching food,
Right.
not to give them anything for feeding. This is for me, even if you say they can survive without food, direct food, okay, but why I should? What makes
Yeah.
that for sense?
No, I agree. When you have an organism where 60% of its body is designed for eating, you would think you would need to feed it. I mean, that's just how I look at it.
Yeah.
And particularly looking at the work Jamie Craig started 15 years ago on getting corals to spawn, he had corals thriving, but then he found out, if you feed them, then they have enough energy to actually produce eggs and sperm and reproduce. If you don't, they'll grow, they'll be okay, they'll thrive, but they just don't have enough energy to spawn. That convinced me more than anything else. I've seen why you need to feed the corals to get them to the
Yeah.
point where they may spawn, which is as healthy an organism as there is. Unhealthy organisms don't reproduce. Healthy organisms reproduce. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but for me, this question is really hard to understand. So why is that a question?
Because I think people have a tendency to overfeed, and when they
Yeah.
overfeed, that's when you get into problems. The question is probably not should I feed the coral. The question probably is how much should I feed the coral? How do I determine how to feed it to keep things at the proper levels?
Yeah, it is exactly that what you said. So let me say, if you have a lot of fish in your tank and you give them a good food, and this is something which is not discussed, never. What is a good feeding? And a good feeding for reef fish is quite simple. If you have a reef fish, so what they can eat, what they get is some of them eat a little bit, mostly the biofilm. So when they scrabbing, and even the plant eaters, so they scratch on the surface, they scratch on the algae. So 50% of that what they get is bacteria. And the bacteria film is a little bit of sugar, and a lot of bacteria, and concentrated fatty acids and elements. So that's what they put in. Then they eat eggs, they eat shrimps, worms, lorry, even coral polyps, whatever. So mainly you have protein and fat. If you look today to flake food, which is heated, so where is there the fatty acids, where is there the vitamin, and where is there the protein? So the protein is less than 30%. A good feeding goes over 75% and 50% of fat. So, but this makes the food expensive. So if you go feed your fish with high protein, you see my cooking studio where I put how to make
Yep.
fish feed.
Yep.
And then I add to this fish feed, I add a lot of fatty acids. So this is the vitamin solution and fatty solution, food energizer, what we call them. So it's a mixture between vitamins and all that stuff, which you have lost if you don't have a living creature like a worm or like a shrimp. So if you feed that to a fish, the metabolism of the fish turns into making energy from protein. So they need a lot of energy to go from protein to energy. That's the same. Human body is the same. If you use carbohydrate, it's easy for us. If you use protein, we need more energy to metabolize it. And the same for the fish. But in this case, the fish getting all day long ammonia out of the gills. So now you buy a chemical to get ammonia in. You have a lot of fish in your tank. If you feed them with high protein and they go into the coral and out and into the coral, they bring the coral all day long ammonia. Not in high amount, not in a peak, but the whole day long. And from this nitrogen source, together with the particleized phosphate and what the food comes into, the coral can produce nearby all the amino acids and stuff what they need. This is the key. That's if you look on the videos in the reef, you see that you have the coral, you have the fish. Fish go out, grab plankton, and go immediately back to hide between the coral. Then they go out and in and out and in, and all day long they eat, 12 hours long. So, and at the end of the night, what they're doing at night, they go into the coral, sleeping there, and breathing all the ammonia out. And then the next morning they start again. So it means the coral have 24 hours food in ammonia, in particleized, and then they catch at night, they catch another food themselves. If you see how much a coral can eat, it's unbelievable. So, and what we're doing is that we use fish food and coral food and another coral food and dry food, and that one, which is sometimes not made for corals, it's only a grinded fish food. And then I see that the fish don't get the right stuff. So very high protein, very high fat, very low carbohydrates. And then you feed the corals with the same at the end. And then you over fertilize it. And this causing then the boring algae and the dying corals, cause it's way too much from the wrong stuff.
So that's one of the things I've been discussing with people. Are we feeding our fish too much protein and not enough plant-based material? Because a lot of our fish, particularly tangs and angelfish, tend to eat more plant material than they do protein, but we tend to feed them because it's easier, high protein diets.
Yeah, but look, even on the tanks, yeah, you have very little fish like the yellow tang who are really, really a little bit different. So what you can give them, you can give them plant-based food. This is very simple. So you even can get the nori algae or algae food, which is available. Really, you can get it all over. So this is absolutely not a problem because if you look on the seaweed, there is a lot of protein in. They're very rich in fiber, they're very rich in the proteins, but not carbohydrates. So if you use wheat, I think this is something totally different than the fiber from an algae. So this is what they need, and they need it all day long. If they eat algae in the sea, they also eat the biofilm. So even there, the protein levels is not under 40%, 45%.
Well, we also talked about one other additive you briefly mentioned was the need for amino acids. Do you think adding amino acids to a reef tank? Because when I did it, I always had problems with RTN, STN, and a lot of other people have as well. So I no longer add any amino acids. What's been your experience with amino acid additions?
That's always the same. Depends. So you have you had a high DOC, okay? So we
Right.
had some elements not on point. Then you have a high DOC, and then you put amino acids on it. So this is really your tank just burned, and you take another gasoline in. So the corals cannot use it. They cannot smell it anymore. The protein, the specific proteins they build to transport the amino acids in, they are blocked from all these long molecules which are in the tank. So it means you put energy in a system where cannot use it anymore. So that means bacteria growing or algae are growing or whatever, and this causing then the RTN. So it is way too much because if you feed your fish well, really good with your own make food and with vitamins and fatty acids, you should have more than enough amino acids and nitrogen in the tank. So, but look, now we see very often, like we have also, so we have our coral farming, and every people looking how the farmers do it. And now you have a tank and in the aquariums or raceways, which have a little bit of plastic, no decoration, a few fish, very little, and a mass of corals. So that means the relation between fish feeding is extremely low compared to your tank. And the water cleaning there is massive. So big skimmers, UV, all day long water change, everything will be cleaned immediately that the tanks look superb. So, but there's no depot left. In your reef tank, with all your detritus, with your bacteria, with all the stuff you dose, it's a total different situation. So, amino acids, yes, it's very often necessary, and yes, mostly you don't need it. If you have a good food, if you have a bad food, make from carcass, not from whole fish, heated or whatever, producing in industrial quality, very low quality stuff, then it's maybe possible that you need some amino acids because your proteins, what you give into the tanks, are not healthy or not good enough. But you must really say it really depends. So in this case, I really must say I recommend to do organic testing. And this organic testing is, we use that, as I say, NPOC, which you can get as an update. So if you can do an update with every of your tests, you press on the update, you pay it, and then you get it for, I think it's $90, $19 only, and then you get all the organics. But you can also use the phosphate differences what we make, so that we have different machines testing the orthophosphate, testing the phosphorus, and the difference you can also use as a factor. And then you know it, and I think every 3 months to test it should be more than enough.
Sounds good.
So, but I can show you also something. I don't think so. Nobody knows it yet. We will send this next week to the US. So you will surely get also one of them.
Okay.
And that's a new test coming now to the US. It calls Reef ICP Super MS. And in this Super MS, you have all the machines possible. So we have 16 machines running in our lab. So you have the ICP OS, you have the ICP MS, you have SAK, you have organic like NPOC, you have total nitrogen, so NPOC and TMB, you have an RO test, you have titration, so you have nearby 200 different values. So every test available on the market is in one test, which you can use then. So the sale of that will start in the next week when it will arrive in our at our courier at our distributors, and it will be around $69 then for the whole package. Then. So to try it out, to test it.
Yeah. No, that's impressive that you basically have every test in one package.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's still possible to go over the updates. So you don't need to test everything. You can also go over the layer and to test it on it. And yeah, meanwhile, the machines are running long enough. We had now several thousand MS testing. So we adjust the methods. So we have a look on it, how we deal with the high organic compounds to do the testing. And then it will, yeah, it will.
How often is a tank like the museum at Karlsruhe, which was the most spectacular public aquarium I've seen? How often is that water tested? Weekly?
They do once a week, yeah. So we do the tests on it on this tank since 12 years now. No, 10 years now.
10
Around
years.
10 years. Yeah. Every week we do the testing. Yesterday, Hannes, so the curator, he's retired. So 2 days ago, we have the team there in our facility for the next training for organic and MS and that stuff. Because there's young people now going into the tank and they want to do their way. They want to do some changes. So they do every week. Yeah, but so that gives us a very nice, how I can say, that gives us a very nice idea about old tanks. So how was the history? And we also do that in China. So we support and doing the most public aquariums in the world, and even the super large one in China, which has over 1 million gallon, only with cores. And there we do all the things. So that's to make maybe to give a reaction on some of the rumors that that there's only one company can do tests, which is there are 2, 3 leading ICP companies now. They get their experience, they know how to do testing, and it's still possible that we have a difference between. So maybe in our next live stream, we will take the time to go between how to do interpretation from MS to OAS and how it can be used. Because I see so often that people, they go into OAS and MS, and then they don't understand why sometimes it's 0 and sometimes shows level. So maybe if you like, we can do that. We can do that the next time when we're doing the things.
Yeah, we can talk about explaining in depth the difference between OES and MS, how they're done and what they show would be nice the next time.
Yeah. The reason for this is it's becoming a little bit complicated. So it's a little bit more complicated as usually published. And we heard it very often that it says it is wrong testing, or it's not understandable why we show something, why not. But this case is that we have different methods why we use. And when I look into the test, mostly I can exactly see which one is proper, which one has maybe an effect or not. And so it is not that easy to compare these two different way of testing. So what I can say from my side, the MS, it has really advantages. So definitely.
Yeah.
At an MS testing is more accurate and more precise. This is not true. So this is a myth, definitely.
Okay.
What is the key on EMS is that you get numbers of elements which you have sometimes in the OAS 0. So with the modern machines we're using, we can go down with the most elements now to 0.4, 0.2 micrograms. So, but some of them, like selenium, they are really difficult, even for the MS. So if you are on selenium, we have 2.53 micrograms as a minimum detection limit. So that means it will be shown very often as 0. So people dose the selenium and wait 2 weeks, then they ship again a test, and then it's 0. Of course, selenium also reacts very fast with the surface, with the other stuff. So now they said, I dose it, and you say it's 0, and then it's wrong. But if you look on the sheet, we especially say selenium is something you can dose, but do not. For them who wants to dose, we give the numbers. But if you want to know, if you want to have a level, then you have to go to MS, because MS can go down to 0.5 micrograms. So even with MS, if you be lower and you need selenium in way lower amount, it's still 0 even on the MS. So that's something which can be used to say, at the moment I find a selenium, I dose too much. So that's also, if you look on my test, you see it's NN to 2.5, means from 0 to 2.5 is okay. So it's not necessary to dose. So cause if you work with system like Balling Light and the trace elements, what you have, or these ready to reef, you don't need to have every number on a point. It is fully okay if you concentrate on these dynamic elements, keep them in line, and all the others like iron, manganese, cobalt, chromium can be 0. Doesn't matter. It's usually fully okay.
Well, you told me out of the 200 plus thousand tests you've done, probably less than 5% have all the numbers spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, most people have something off a little bit. Very few people have everything right where it should be.
No one has that. This is a theoretical construct. So these perfect levels, these absolutely perfect. It is really no joke. I had one test. It was nearby 100%. And they asked him, so it's the 1st April or is this a joke? And it was really not a joke. He had it perfect online. And I really asked him, so, hey, what are you doing? So how this goes? He said, oh, no idea, I don't. So it was one time from a few 100,000 that ever.
How did the tank look, though?
not normal. Yeah, because this is not the key. You see, at your tank is typically for everything. So you are so ambitious and you have so fun for reef keeping that you try and you work out and you test it and you do it there. So, and as I always said, your friend Sanjay always using you as a test object. So, and that means you have a quite a lot instability in your tank and a over fertilization on the tank. So your current was not that was proper. And as soon as you change one step by the next and reducing it and bring a bit more stability into the tank, it immediately turns and becomes better and better. And I fully understand how difficult it was to see how the over fertilization of your tank will be shown. You said, yeah, the chorus looks nice. I was the first time at your tank. Said, no, it's not. So uh, you have to, it's missing there. And then I show you several points and then you see them. And I know that you're an experienced reef keeper, but to see that in the own tank with the slow changes is really hard. It's really not easy. And it's a very complicated hobby and very complicated animals. So, and nowadays I have sometimes the feeling that people have the expectation that they can run a successful reef tank same like they keep a dog or a Guinea pig. So, but here we have a full biotope. We have so many chemical, physical reaction on it, biological reaction, which most of them we don't understand till now. That it is impossible to run a reef tank fully successful, and everyone who told you that is a liar. It's definitely not possible. And every farmer will tell you that it is always a run on razor's edge. One little mistake, which you destroy in 5 minutes, you have to rework 3 months long to get it back. And so I think this is also necessary to tell the people that an ICP is not the proof of success. An ICP says not that the tank will be stable. So we're doing that in our own farm, and I doing live streams every Sunday and explaining to people the differences and how we work on it. And I explain very often, look, we have every day we do testing by hand, and every day we have an ICP. So I don't know how many farms be on the world. So I think we are one of the only one who has a full running coral farms in more than 20 years, plus the ICP, plus the product. And even them, it is possible that we have no stability in the tank. Due to the farming is a lot of changes and this and that. We can do that better. We have way more better under control. So we don't need any medicine against RTN or STNs. We do that over the chemical situation. So that's you see in the test the FSS value and that stuff.
Hmm.
And this has worked out the last 20 years. So there's a lot of experience in these numbers and in these relations which we work out. But it's not a proof for success. So if you forget your alkalinity for a few days, then all the discipline you have before it will be destroyed within not a few months. So this
Yep.
also happens to us. So that's normal.
Like we said at the beginning, it's always something, Claude. There's always something that you think is trivial that makes a big difference in a tank.
Yeah, this is. I think maybe it's also one of the things is we have too much influencers at the end. So and it is not clear. Very often, it's not clear which person say what. So what is the background? So what is the effect on it? So for me, I think it's clear. So I'm the owner of Fauna, and I run a company, and I want to sell products. So that everybody knows that. So it's not like a hobbyist, but I see so many influencers running today around. They are so influenced from the background, um, used from companies which have not own voice and are reefers like we are. And there are
Right.
some other companies which are built from reefers. So they make the products because they are reefers, they have experience, and you immediately see then the difference in the products and the success what you can have with the products and the support of these type of companies. And that's my only thing I said. Look if the companies can keep corals over a long time and have nice corals. So from that type of product, usually you don't have any issues on it. But if a company has no corals, no coral farms, so how they can know, how they can have the experience, they can maybe make one product good, or they make nice pumps or nice LEDs, but they even cannot keep corals alive for longer than 1 year. And so my question is always, so where's the proof of it and where's the trust of it? So
Well, as my friend Ray from Pirates Reef says, if their tank ain't nice, don't take their advice. So that's
yeah, yeah, that's a nice thing. So I need to
yeah.
remember
You
it on it.
remember that? Yeah, no, but Ray has very nice tanks, so I tend to heed his advice.
Yeah. So cause you know we need to see it. So
Yeah.
the ICP is really, it's becoming a really good tool. So
Yeah, it's a tool. It's not the be all and end all. I mean, like we always say, don't chase numbers and don't do things quickly. That's why we, as we talked about in the middle of this talk, when you get your ICP results back, don't go out and add everything that night and try to change everything to get those numbers perfect overnight. Take your time, let things get stable, and do one thing at a time. And if you do one thing at a time, you can see if it makes a difference or not. It's much easier than if you change 10 things and something good happens. Which one did it? Or if you see something bad, which one did it? You don't know unless you take your time.
yeah, but sometimes I try when I sit down and to see all the questions and even the live chat and other things running. Sometimes I have really the feeling about it. What would I do when I'm a beginner? So when I want to start, so maybe if I do something new, which is new for me, like programming. So when I see all the suppliers and all the companies telling me, oh, you can be the best programmer in the world if you use my AI programming tool, if you use that one. And at the end, I must say, I sit there and have no idea. So I choose only that which gives me maybe at the beginning a better feeling. And now I change it 3, 4 times now till I find this tool what I want. And I think this is becoming nearby impossible for a beginner to get the right information due to the amount of mass information out of the market.
Well,
And it
what I tell
becomes
beginners
so
that
difficult.
contact me is find someone who has a nice tank, talk with them, and have them mentor you. Not everyone will do that, but some people will say, okay, I can help 2 or 3 people. And if everybody did that, the beginners have a lot higher level of success than if they just read everything that's on the internet, which is insane.
Yeah, but you know it's difficult to find such people, and you know how much time is how some hobbyist invested in other hobbyists' time.
Yeah,
Due to
I know.
that ICP is I think, you know, when I go a little bit back, and I know we go now in this street of earlier was everything better, which was surely not, but
Mm.
we had more concentration on the actual time on the tank. So it was a time for have a look on the technique. So we had a few 2, 3 lights, 2, 3 decorations. That it. So it was very fast. We know how to build up the tank because everybody doing it same.
Yep.
So then we buy the only choice was if we take the more blue metal halides or the more daylight metal halides. So this was the only choice you had.
Yeah,
So
14Ks, 10Ks, 20Ks. Those were your
yeah,
choices.
Ushio, Phoenix, or
And radiums.
and radiums. So there was 3. So we have a
Yep.
bunch of possibilities. Now we have 350,000 different LEDs
LEDs.
and
And different
every LED.
programs. And do you want a blue tank? Do you want a blue and white tank? Do you want a white tank?
Yeah.
Or do you want to change throughout the day?
Yeah, I think it's really, really becoming difficult on it. Really difficult for the people on it. And when I see just when I thought when we started with the beginner, and I said them to them here these super MS. So here in Europe we sell it only to these companies who has the lab certification, because there is so much information now in the test that you definitely need somebody who is trained on it.
Right.
Or we just see on these tests and on the amount of information we share. So one time people say it's great that you share so much information. On the other side, people say it's becoming for me way too complicated. So I think for companies like we are, it's starting becoming a challenge to take the customer with us on the road. So to think about to going from one step to the next, uh, to 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 bring them to the jungle, to their results they want to have. And I'm also surprised very often how often I ask, "What is the goal? And what do you mean? So, how you think your tank should look like when it's ready?" And most of them they have no answer. Yeah, I want to have some animals mixed. And then you start to talk about the biotope and the different things the corals need. And it's still that many people think that coral is a coral living in a reef like a plant in a forest. They don't
Yeah.
understand anymore that that we talk about 100 different habitats, about 1,000 different type of corals and lights and where they grow to make it proper. But they even don't have the idea about the goal, where they want to go, how it should look like. And so we start very often. So go into the internet, search a picture of a tank that you like, and then show me the picture, and then we can go this road that you will have success in the future. But we start very often with that after they invested a few $1,000 in skimmers and filters and separate overflows and socks and so much techniques which you don't need, and all these over technique tech all these massive technique will only bring bad results because they cannot handle it. So, and they always so surprised that we run our farms with a skimmer with pumps, so to get the currency lights and a small filter with carbon or CO lights, and that's it. There's nothing else in the tank. So, and they so often don't understand. And we said so often, hey, when I don't use it as a professional coral producer, so why you should?
Well, I saw that when I went to Martin's house and saw Martin Kunzelik's tank, which is
Yeah,
a spectacular tank. It is as simply maintained as your coral farm. He had
yeah.
no elaborate equipment. It was just water flowing to the basement through a skimmer, pumped back up, with nothing elaborate on it, but the corals and the fish were thriving.
Yeah. He has a little bit high nutrients, my friend, because he used old rocks on it and he likes feeding the fish. So
Yeah, well,
we still work on it.
but everything was doing well. I mean, the main thing that impressed me was the Goniopora that had grown from a single head into like a tree of Gonioporas. You rarely see that.
Yeah, that's nice that you told that, because that's also a very funny thing is I see very often in the US about discussions about the iron and the manganese and the point of anti-caking and the dangers of manganese or whatever. So, and it is so funny to see. And some last time I had not that much time to write, but it seems I need to go back to these groups because it started that and very little person say, "Oh, this is toxic," of this. So, and we said, "No, these salts are okay." So we used that salts in 50 years. And now they're dosing the iron and the manganese into the tank to support their gonies. And I
Yeah,
said,
Gonies seem to do better when you give them manganese, just like mushrooms seem to do better when you add rubidium. I mean, there is a fair amount of people doing stuff that see good results with things.
these manganese, if you use a salt with a standard anti-caking like Tropicat, like we have in that one, you don't need to dose that anymore.
Right.
It's more than enough in. And if you have a proper care system, like the calculation what you're doing, so this discussion you don't have in Europe. No one in Europe do that. Nobody knows why this discussion coming on its way because we don't have this issue on it. So because we
I
know that we have too much of this in the tanks. So that's really strange sometimes when and see and follow these discussions there, and it's like, yeah, but only one person said this, and now you dose everybody. If you're dosing that, we will crash your tanks over the
Well,
time.
that's how it's been literally since the beginning of the hobby, Claude. Anecdotal evidence. One person says something, everybody goes, "Oh," and jumps on it. It's only in the past 10 years that we've had a lot more
Yeah, but
scientific facts and basis for something. But
we
the
can test
mindset
it
of
now.
anecdotal is still there.
Yeah, but Mike, we can test it now.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. But we've only been able to do that for the last 10 years. Prior to that, it was all anecdotal. I mean, it started with 20 years ago, Dick Perrin peeing in his tanks and adding ammonia and growing clams very fast, to us now, some of us dosing ammonia in the tanks and getting the corals to grow faster. I mean, he knew back then that corals absorbed ammonia better and faster than nitrate. So now we've come full circle where we can actually test for it and see that the corals do grow faster with ammonium. I mean, it's amazing, but we do now have a lot more factual. But what I'm saying is, anecdotal is still the mindset of a lot of the hobby, and that's why you also have the influencers saying you need to do this or you need to buy that. It's anecdotal. It's not scientifically based. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, the scientific basing is, and the hearing on unexperienced people coming out of the studies, the studies and stuff that's coming out, they're super interesting. So you can learn a lot about biochemical processes in that one. But
Yep.
for me, the very big mistake is there are absolutely two major things. So we have this lab there, and we do approve every day on the Coral Farm. So we have eight reef tanks, so 8 systems, and every 8 systems will be tested every day. So there is not only the testing. So I can talk a little bit about the AI and the stuff what we're doing to make sure that the parameters which we give out are correct. So the point is, what we're doing is that the one step that every day when we do that, so we have a team, and the team we have PhDs of organic chemistry. We have them for biology, for marine biology, for normal chemistry, for normal biology, which are working in the lab. So it's 8 people for them, and all of them. We have also 2 lab technicians. All of them are very experienced or have the scientific background. So, and then we have the interpretation team. So the interpretation team is all the people who are doing all day long the support and doing all day long working with the corals. And the team in the lab is not allowed to have a reef tank because I don't want to have them to influence in anything. So they have to produce numbers if I like them or not. So um, now this interpretation team has always a little bit of fight against the lab team because the lab team say this is the number. We go up. We have specific corals looking for it. So let me say there's a very nice, superb coral from Kenya, East Africa, which is Chespitularia. And Chespitularia have a very nice blue fluorescent. So, but this blue fluorescent is you cannot have this fluorescent if you have bromine under 70 um, under under the value of 70. So usually you need 72, 75 to have the blue color. So, and when the lab tells me, oh, we find 75, and I look at the coral and it has lost the color, it's definitely not the key. So it's something wrong. The lab, they say, yeah, but all the numbers are okay, the calibration is okay. And we go up and say, no, it's a mistake. So then we go and fight to find the source. And then we find out there was something wrong in the houses to make some of the issues. So that was some years ago. And so this method to creating the correct numbers is mainly coming also to the difference between the lab and the farm. So that we put them things together. So, and a few years ago, we start to say, this is a problem that we get the numbers after. And so we starting to programming an AI, which helps us with plausibility checks, with expectations levels. So today is like that. If you send me a test, and we released the update last Monday, by the way. So if you send me a test, immediately the AI will check how is the history of your tank. So, and it created expectation levels. So the system says, I will give a sample. Your strontium level is always between 7.8 and 8.3. So my system now says the expectation level of Mike's tank is between 7.6 and 8.5. This is what we should find in your tank. So now the system is, and we create a system who goes during the test, it has a contact to the machine. So we have 60 machines, and every time when your test is testing on machine, it immediately checks if it's running to the extraction level, if it's right to the standards, if it's right to the average levels you have usually or the others have usually, and if not, so if something is not in this extraction, it makes automatically a second test, or later then it will be shown by a person. So we can speed up now 7-8 hours due to the situation that we can say we do the plausibility checks while we are in the work.
Right.
This is and we use all the data from the last 400,000, every day coming 500 new tests into this AI. And but you by self, we create an individual expectation level, how the machines control your test. So we know exactly if the test is correct or not. And then we can, give me a second, please.
Yep.
Then we can work that out and can say okay, this is not influenced by an accident or a particle or something like that, and give the wrong level. And this works on every parameter automatically. And there is another checks between. So we have a super full, how I can say it, a super full level on that point all day long. So, and this is the major things about the plausibility, about the precision, how the tests nowadays work. And step by step, we increase this AI also that you will get the individual dosing amount, but we also check how is your light, which kind of food you give if you set that to us, and then the system can automatically. Give me a second, please.
Okay.
Ich habe einen Livestream, ne, Schätzele? Nein, wir haben einen Livestream. So, I'm sorry, but my daughter gets weird.
That's okay. Here's my
No,
new
they
puppy.
also, that's always the bullshit. So they have nothing in their head that they want to have more limit on these shit iPhone games, what they want to play. And they know exactly what I'm doing and not. This is unbelievable. As soon as they're coming in a certain age, you get
Yep.
really crazy of it.
Well,
So,
Claude, we're getting close to my end time because we're going out to dinner soon, and I have to go get ready. It's 4:30 here.
oh yeah, we have just 1.5 hours. Great. So Mike, okay. So we had some points of the ICP. It was great to talk with you again. So let us do that again if you like.
We will do that as often as you like, Claude.
Perfect.
And Rosanna says hi.
Yeah, was a pleasure again. So a long time. So we were a little bit under stress. So I will send you to you. So
Okay.
I'm happy to see how you like it and how it goes.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Take care, Claude. I'll be talking to you soon.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.